Hi, I'm Meryl Ann Butler, and thank you for watching Classical Painting Tips with me. Today we're going to look at A Rainy Day in Paris. And I offer private lessons on Zoom and in person, and friendly feedback in video recordings as well at oceanviewarts.com. So here's my tips for painting A Rainy Day in Paris. So here's a painting that a student did who asked for feedback on how to make it look a little more realistic. So that's what we'll be talking about today. Now, I appreciate having reference images. So if a reference image is available, that's very helpful. I can give a lot more help with that. But a reference image was not available for this one, and still there's a lot that we can talk about. So the first thing will be linear perspective. This image of Paris is in 1-point perspective, which means that the parallel lines appear to recede to a vanishing point on the horizon. The horizon is also your eye level. And the typical example we see of that is the train tracks. We know that they don't get skinnier as they get further away, so this is an optical illusion. So the horizon is always at our eye level, and we can see it on the Paris picture on the left. And we also have an image, sketch of some buildings on the right that also show a 1-point perspective with buildings. So useful for comparison here. So this is a brick wall that shows 1-point perspective. The eye level, again, is that straight line. So you look down that brick wall and see which of those lines look straight, and that's going to be the horizon or the eye level. And then you see the two blue lines, the line above it is angling down and the line below it is angling up, and that's what helps us tell which one is the horizon. And so from the top and the bottom of the brick wall, both of those lines will appear to recede to a point on the horizon called the vanishing point. So here we have the horizon on our painting, and we want to figure out where the vanishing point is. So I found a couple of lines here on either side on the bottom that I could construct an angle that would meet on the horizon, and that yellow dot would be the vanishing point. So that we have our correct lines below the horizon. We also need lines above the horizon, and I've superimposed this brick wall on top that kind of shows you where those angles want to be on the top of the buildings. And this is just a rough overlay, but we can see from that that the buildings that are further away are a little bit too tall. So if you wanted to construct this based on the laws of perspective, you would want to construct a line drawing with accuracy from the beginning. Now, I'm not suggesting that that should be done to this painting. A lot of times a feedback is not even about the piece of artwork that we're talking about, it's about future works. And so in the future, I would say it would be useful to get a piece of paper out and construct your perspective lines before starting to paint. And that'll give you a little bit of a head start on this. Nevertheless, this is a lovely painting. So we're going to talk about what would be useful to adjust on it and what's useful to think about for next time. So here we see our blue lines again, and we see them in the Paris picture on the left and on the buildings on the right. So the tops of the buildings and the bottom of the buildings want to appear to recede to a point on the horizon in 1-point perspective. The other thing is vertical lines will remain vertical. Now they will tend to get closer together, but in 1-point perspective, as you can see in the cube on the lower right, those vertical lines will not change their angle. They will always stay vertical. So we want to look at the windows here. Some of those windows have vertical lines that are slanted a little bit, and those could be straightened up, and that would give a feel of perspective. and the windows underneath too. Some of those lines are at an angle. So you do want to make sure when you're working with perspective not to get too confused by the angles of the horizontal lines. Don't let them confuse you about the verticals because they want to stay vertical. So we'll talk a little bit about aerial perspective. Aerial perspective is different than linear perspective. Aerial perspective has to do with pollution or dust or moisture in the air. And since this is a rainy picture, what's going on here is there's rain or rain droplets in the air, and that's what makes the Eiffel Tower look a little grayer than the other buildings. It's a little further away because there's basically a filter of moisture between us and the Eiffel Tower. Now, this was addressed in this painting, but I think it could be enhanced a little bit more. So we'll look at what would happen if you did that. And so I lightened it a little bit and I softened the edge slightly in what I could do in the program that I'm working on. But the further away something is in the distance, generally the less sharp the edges are going to be. So if I was working on this actual painting, I would probably soften up more of the edges, and that would put it a little bit more in the background, and this gives you a more of a feeling of distance. So this is how it was in the beginning, again, just to recap, and this is what it looks like. So you can see how that pushes it back into the distance. And this is something that would be fairly easy to do to this painting. So while I don't recommend adjusting the perspective, the linear perspective, this is something that would be fairly easy to do if you wanted to work on this painting a little more. So let's take a look at values. Values are lights and darks. And we want to ask, where is the light coming from in this image? That's always the first question you ask when you're addressing values in light and shadow. And it's really hard to tell where the light might be coming from. We don't have any indicators really that are telling us. But because it's a rainy day, the light has to be coming from the sky, and it's very diffused. It's not like sunlight, which would cast specific shadows. It's very diffused light. So where would this light go? Well, it would hit any up planes. So the up planes in this picture are the tops of these awnings and the tops of the umbrellas. And the vertical planes would get less light. So that would be anything like the sides of the buildings and the little front pieces of the awning there. So part of the feeling that, part of the reason we have trouble figuring out where the light is going from is that these awnings are kind of opposite. The top of the awning should be lighter and this vertical part's a little darker. So we're going to do that and see what happens. So here I've added a little light to the top of the awnings. And here I've added a little dark to the verticals. And take a quick look at that building in the upper right-hand corner. That's really distracting. It's got a lot of light in it. And so we're going to darken that up too because it is a vertical plane. So there you go. And immediately when we do that, our focus tends to go more towards the center of the picture. So now I've added light to the tops of the umbrellas. The program I'm doing this with is not very fine-tuned. So these are just chunks of shapes that I've put on there, and I just made them a little transparent. So I'm dealing with this as a color sketch and just kind of putting chunks of color. But it gives you the idea. If I was really painting this, we would do a little more fine-tuned. So we have the top of the umbrellas. And now we want to have some shadows. So now we have a little bit of a shadow on the bottom of the umbrella and on the bottom of the dresses. And so that gives a little bit of dimension to the figures. And those poor girls only have one leg, and I guess they have to hop like a pogo stick. and that stresses me out. So I'm going to give them some legs. So there we have it. They look much more uh, like they're walking down the street, giving them two legs. So here we have our almost finished sketch. So this is before we did anything. And if you squint your eyes, that's a good trick. Squint your eyes, you notice that things are a little bit chopped up here in this. And if you keep squinting your eyes and you look at the after, you'll see that the shapes are a little bit more cohesive. So we have one more thing. We'll talk before, we'll look at before and after again here, and after. And one more little tip about composition. So we'll look at these three figures, and their feet are touching the edge of the picture. And that's usually not a good idea, because if you frame it, you're going to cover 1/4 of an inch. And also, the three pedestrians here are pretty much the focus of the painting. And so we don't want to have them touching the outside edges. So what I did was I moved them up, and here they are, moved up a little bit, and I gave them a little reflection. And so they feel now they want to draw us into the picture plane a little more. We're a little further away, but we see them walking, and we want to kind of come in there and join them, because it looks like a very lovely place to be. So here they are in the beginning again, how they were to start, and again, what it looks like when you move them in. So that enhances the composition. And again, you can squint your eyes. We'll look at the last picture here. If you squint your eyes at both of these, on the left, you'll notice things seem a little choppier. And on the right, you'll notice there's a little bit more cohesion. And that cohesion actually makes you feel a little more relaxed too when you look at the painting. So this was a good painting to start with. It has lots of mood, and it could be improved by a few value changes. And like I said, I wouldn't recommend doing any perspective changes other than the aerial perspective of lightening the Eiffel Tower and maybe straightening some of the vertical lines. That would be useful. And so we can see what we did here. We created a little more light on the top of the awnings, a little shadow on the sides, and moved the figures in. And I think overall it's improved the painting. So hopefully we answered the students' question about how to make this painting look a little more realistic. And that's our presentation. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing. And I offer private lessons, consultations, and friendly feedback via Zoom and video recording. Other people call it critiques, but I don't feel like I criticize people. I just help direct them from where they are to where they want to be with friendly feedback. So that's why I call it that. And thank you for watching.